Welcome, everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes to get started as a courtesy to those still in the middle of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. We have a great topic to cover today, but first, a few reminders. Note that for today's call, we're targeting to go over 60 minutes, close to 90-minute session. During this time, please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the IM window. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. But I want to provide an additional mechanism to ensure any questions we miss get answered. If you'll visit aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community, you'll be able to ask questions on our Azure Sentinel forum. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question. We always love to hear your feedback and how we can improve these webinars. You can do so at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security webinars. While you are there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to answer you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews. You can sign up for that at aka.ms/security private preview, requesting features, giving feedback, reviewing our product roadmaps, attending in-person events, or joining webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. We have a great topic for you today. We'll be talking about Azure Sentinel, specifically about the new features introduced at Microsoft Ignite last week and other Sentinel functionality. I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Ofer Shazaf. Ofer is our member of our Azure Sentinel team who has a deep expertise in this topic. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to him. Ofer, floor is yours.
Thank you, Valon. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining me for the webinar today. Before I start, even before I introduce myself, this is part of a series of webinars. Not all of your questions will be answered today, not because the great team online is not capable of that, but because some topics belong to the next episodes in the series. Today would be the first session, so we'll talk about what the product does, functionality. It's a deep dive. We'll go beyond, just a basic introductory call, but there's way more to learn. Next week, we'll touch on architecture, cloud and on-prem architecture, collection, deployment, and such. This would be a great opportunity for the architects and engineers among you to learn more about how to deploy Sentinel. We'll then have a short break, a break for the holidays, so those that celebrate the Christian holidays do not miss. And we'll reconvene in January to address the analysts, to talk about security and talk about how to use Sentinel in real life to operate your SOC. And we'll continue again with the security people talking about hunting. We already had a hunting webinar in September. We'll revisit the topic in January. So this is just the first episode. The entire season is ahead of us. Today we'll discuss an overview, a technical overview, a deep dive, focusing on new features introduced at Microsoft Ignite last week. My name is Ofer Shazaf. I'll be delivering this overview. I joined Microsoft specifically for the Sentinel project around a year ago. My background is SIEM. I came from many years as a product manager at ArcSight, which used to be the leading SIEM product. It means I've met many successful and a few failed SIEM implementations, and I hope to be able to share a bit of that alongside talking about Sentinel and its features in this webinar. The first few slides are, well, marketing. I'm not a big fan, I'm not a marketing person, but it is a good starting point to understand what Sentinel is about and what it can provide. I will not surprise you if I tell you that the world you have to protect is changing. There's just more of it. One thing I always find funny about those two slides is the word cloud is not there, apart from the footnote at the bottom of this page. Of course, cloud is one of the biggest changes. I assume many of you are Microsoft customers, which means that you are in your journey to the cloud. And alongside other changes in the IT environment, a cloud is creating a big change. This overstretches security operations. It means that it takes more time to analyze breaches. There's less people capable of doing that, and there's a good chance that things go uncovered. In this presentation, I'll try to show you how Sentinel can help you. The proof is on me. The 6 words to put it are, and the rest will be breaking that into actual details, that we have introduced a cloud-native SIEM that should help the security operations team to manage better, to identify threats faster, to resolve them faster, and to remediate. Cloud-native SIEM means that we utilize the cloud and the artificial intelligence capabilities it provides in order to help you. Let's start breaking that down into way more practical features and functions. So let's try to discuss what cloud native implies. So first of all, I'll start with the middle one. A cloud native SIEM implies that scale is not an issue. If you've been doing SIEM for a while, SIEM, Security Information Event Management, the nerve center, the operating system for your security operations, you know that it has to handle a lot of incoming telemetry from a lot of sources, and that requires horsepower. There's architecting to be done. By utilizing a cloud-native SIEM, we just don't have this issue. We build our SIEM based on Microsoft's existing platform as a service capabilities, and we really don't care how much data you drive into the system. I asked our engineering team to run a report, and we learned we have customers that use up to 400,000 events per second, or in gigabyte per day numbers up to 100 gigabyte per day. Those are large numbers, and the amazing part is that I needed a report for that. It's not something that our engineering or field teams worked hard with customers to implement. That's easy. Cloud native, auto scaling, whatever comes with that is the promise of the cloud. Cloud also means something else. Cloud also means that it's very easy to start small. Because you don't deploy any servers, you don't have to worry about size in the first place. If you have a specific use case, from what I'll present during the call today, that would be best served by Sentinel, you can use it. Okay? You don't have to scope buy servers for each one of the functions, set up a farm. You just start a service, you consume the data that you need for your use case, you build your detection rules or use ours, and you automate response. Might be the one critical element you have to monitor, say, in your cloud. So scale, small and large. As I mentioned, starting with Sentinel is very easy. We have thousands of users using Sentinel, and the service is a month old. The reason is that starting is just a click away, as you'd expect from a SaaS service. It takes little, and the size of our community is a testimony for that. I personally presented in a meetup in London 3 weeks ago, and I had 100 people in the room. I assumed they were coming for the pizza, but I learned that they all came because they are using Sentinel and wanted to ask questions. Valon mentioned our community online. Go there, read, people ask serious questions and get good answers, because there's no, the barrier to entry is very small if you want to use the product. So beyond cloud scale and no, operational or setup costs, we also try to provide you more, not just easier, by utilizing cloud. And there are two areas where the cloud really helps us. First one I'll point out, we'll discuss that more later, is AI. AI is important, it's a promise of modern technology. It's hard to do with limited computing resources. It's also hard to do with limited data. By utilizing, compute on demand, as well as visibility into a large amount of data, we are able to provide you Microsoft-provided AI that would assist you in detecting attacks. We also enable you to do your own machine learning using our tools. The other area where cloud is really, really good is integration and automation. We have, and we'll see it, a built-in SOAR, Security Orchestration Automation and Response tool, which is just very easy to use and tightly integrated because it's cloud-based. Integration is also easy when you get to collecting data to the SIEM, because anything which is cloud to cloud is usually a click, as opposed to the challenges of collecting on-prem telemetry. I do have to say that when it gets to collecting on-prem telemetry, we have all the capabilities, but I'm not sure it's simpler than what you have today. On-prem is on-prem. When we'll discuss all those today, we'll focus on the five roles of a SIEM, and the presentation will be broken into those. We'll talk about collection and visibility, the log management part. We'll show you what Sentinel can provide you and what we introduced in recent months at Ignite and before that around collection and visibility. We'll talk about detection. We'll talk about how you can create your own detection and what detection we provide you using our own ML. Another way to detect an upcoming use case for a SIEM product is hunting. When you don't want the product just to detect things after they happen, but you want to be proactive and try to identify issues before they happen. And we have both on the security expertise and the functionality tools to assist you with hunting. Of course, once you detect an incident, it's just a starting point. You have to investigate to find the root cause and make sure that you scoped well and you know what was affected. And then you have to respond, and I mentioned automation. And we go through those 5 in order to understand how Sentinel can help you with those and what we innovated recently around those. Before I get to those 5 areas, I do want to mention one thing. I mentioned the security value that we bring. As I mentioned, I came from other security vendors. Every security vendor has a research team working to provide security value for the product. We actually don't have one. The reason is that Microsoft invests a lot in security outside of the scope of Sentinel. Microsoft spends $1 billion a year and a large number of people because we have to protect the largest network on earth. Well, granted, maybe the second largest, Azure. And the same people who make sure that Azure is protected are the people that develop the security know-how within Sentinel. So it's not just a team that has to make the customer happy, it's a team that has to know how to really provide security. So I mentioned 5 areas I'll describe. I picked 11 topics, episodes, going back to my TV series metaphor, that I would like to discuss today. Each one would have, something that I hope would be interesting to you, a bit of news of things we introduced recently, and generally will make life easier for you in general, and if you use Sentinel in particular. Let's start with the first one. Collection. The first thing you do when you implement a new SIEM tool is a tool that collects a lot of data from systems, is to collect data. Sentinel is a full feature SIEM. It's cloud native, it's a SaaS solution, but it's there to collect data from everywhere, including Microsoft sources in the cloud, as you can see on the left, including other clouds and SaaS applications. We already support AWS today, and we're working to add additional capabilities. And of course, also on-prem collection, which is important. On-prem is usually where people ask, but it's a cloud native SIEM. What's on-prem for you? And therefore, I do want to spend a bit of time discussing on-prem collection and the capabilities that we have around that. One thing to do, keep in mind, and save the people helping me to answer a bit, is that the next week's session on architecture would include a lot more information on this topic specifically. So if you feel that your questions were not answered in full today, do join me next week for the on-prem and cloud architecture session. So, collecting from on-prem. The first method that we have for collecting from on-prem is the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, or the Log Analytics Agent. It's an agent that's part of the Microsoft ecosystem. It's not new to Sentinel, so it's not a product that was introduced last month. The agent supports Linux and Windows systems and can collect operating system telemetry from both, so syslog on Linux or Windows events on Windows, as well as additional streams of data from those systems such as Windows Firewall, Windows DNS, DHCP, or actually even files. So if you have logs stored in files, you can read them using the agent. Another element that's here for completeness is an optional collector proxy that enables not to have each agent communicate through the internet directly to Sentinel, but rather through a central exit location. Another option would be remote collection. If you want to collect from Linux machines using syslog, or from most networking and security devices, you'll probably need a syslog collector, and we provide that as well. It's a VM. We are looking, and it's not easy on a way to provide syslog as a service. Syslog is really not built to provide that, so you will have to deploy a VM somewhere to collect those logs. This is similar to the traditional collector that you have with your current SIEM product if you're using one. Another option would be to place this collector in the cloud, even if you collect from on-prem, from branch offices. It's an interesting deployment option for sites that do not have somewhere to put a VM for the collector. You don't really want to send from a branch office to your central office just on the way to the cloud. Makes sense to send directly to the cloud. Our collector is based on a technology, an open source technology called FluentD, which is very versatile. We do find that customers, I'll jump. I want to talk about that. I'll get back to WEF in a second. That customers sometimes prefer Logstash because they are more accustomed to it and to manipulating data using it. So today we support also Logstash as an option for connecting and collecting data for Sentinel. If you have Logstash today, there's a plugin for Sentinel that will enable you to send the same data that you collect today to Sentinel. I already presented, in the middle, I was out of order, our WEF connector. The syslog connector enables remote collection for Linux machines. If you want to collect remotely from Windows machines, a solution for that would be to use our WEF connector, which use Windows Event Forwarding, a feature within Windows to collect events from servers and Windows endpoints. I do want to mention this is still in preview. You'll have to contact us if you want to use it. Next, this slide is complex because collecting from on-prem is complex. Syslog, even WEF, are not built for the cloud. And as a cloud-native connector, we do very easy collection from cloud sources, as the previous slide hinted at. And then we have to provide a comprehensive framework for collecting from on-prem. We are working with partners to make sure that they started streaming events directly using the API to Sentinel. And here you have 3 that already do that. Configuring those to send events to Sentinel is just like cloud. You go to the appliance in 2 of the 3 cases. Semantic, it's a portal. You specify the Sentinel instance you want to connect to, and events magically appear in the cloud. The last option, always important for SIEM, is custom connectors. You'd want to be able to read things which are not covered by any of the options I listed above. Those will inherently use the Sentinel API to send the data, but there are a few ways in which you don't have to directly program to use the API. We have a PowerShell CMD that enable you to send data to Sentinel. Logic Apps, our automation engine, which is also used for our automation within Sentinel, can be used, or Azure Functions, all of them, the last 2 providing serverless options to do that. For example, we have customers that want to send logs that are stored in S3 buckets, and Azure Function, actually even Lambda functions, are a good way to achieve that. All that was long list of technologies more for the architects among you. Naturally, there's also a list of things that are supported out of the box, and this is the list of connectors we introduced at Ignite. One that I want to pick out specifically. The others are vendors and products that we now can get information from. The last one is more interesting. It's a connector, but it's a connector for threat intelligence. There are several ways to get threat intelligence into Sentinel. We'll discuss a bit of that later on. But the most standard way to get threat intelligence is using a protocol called Taxi with a format called Sticks. Most of your threat intelligence sources will support this, and now Sentinel can natively connect to those sources to get threat intelligence and enable you to correlate data stream with this threat intelligence. Lastly, a few pointers. If you go to the product itself, you see that the list of connectors in the product for different reasons is too short and does not actually convey the breadth and depth of connectors that we are supporting. Those 4 blog posts, it's a good moment to mention blogging. We are very actively blogging, as in, several posts a week, sometimes several posts a day. So a lot of information is provided in our blog, in the Sentinel blog, that would help you implement and deploy Sentinel. Those specific 4 blog posts focus on the connectivity options that may not be part of the formal documentation, even though all of them are supported. The first one is a list of syslog and Ceph sources that you can connect, because we support generic Ceph and syslog even if it's not in our gallery today. The second one focuses on collecting from Microsoft services and apps. Sentinel is compatible, uses the same transport mechanism and storage mechanism as log analytics, and as a result, any Microsoft service that can send data to log analytics, Microsoft IT operations solution, can send also to Sentinel. And Microsoft services, especially in Azure, are mandated to provide support for log analytics and therefore also for Sentinel. So if it's Microsoft, good chances that it already sends telemetry to Sentinel, even if it's not in our documentation, it's in the sending side documentation, and the blog post here would list those for you to make it easier. Lastly, I mentioned our agent. Our agent has a large set of capabilities, saving you from the need to get through the Microsoft documentation, which might be massive. The third blog post would direct you to the different capabilities and collection options available with the agent. And lastly, if you want to create custom connectors, the fourth blog post would address that. Now that you collected data, you need to do something with it. Of course, detection, investigation are important, but before that, it makes sense to visualize, to dashboard, to see the data. We introduced recently, I think it was in late September, a new way to do dashboards, which we call workbooks, which we are pretty excited about. It essentially is at the level of creating apps. You can create a user interface. If we didn't do it and you want to do things differently, an engineer wants to provide a new experience for the analyst that would better fit your organization, this would be a great way to do that. We have predefined workbooks that you can select from. You can create your own or customize that one that we provide. And you can take advantage of a large number of available visualization capabilities. We'll get to a demo of those in a second. Workbooks are interactive. I mentioned that they are a bit like apps. For example, the top pickers here are filters that you can define as many of as you'd like, and they will help you filter so you can search for a user. I'll demonstrate in a second. Same applies for the charts here. We'll see it in the demo, probably better than me explaining. And so it goes for the next one. I'll show customization in the demo in a second. Before we get to the workbooks demo, I do want to mention that visualization is also available as part of searching. So when you search, the basic underlying search interface, the Swiss Army knife that enables you to get to every aspect of the data, also enables you to tabularize and visualize. But that is a good time to get to the demo. So This is Sentinel for those that do not know it. Sentinel does live within the Azure portal. It is a standalone system. You don't need Azure to access it, but user management, payment for that matter, is all governed as part of Azure. For those that use Azure, things here would be a bit more familiar, but let's focus on playbooks. I'll start with the Azure AD signing logs playbook. I'll start it. And you'll be able to see that things here are interactive. I can go and search just for a specific user. I don't want to dwell a lot on that because those are real Microsoft users that use our demo environment. But let's assume that you want to just focus on failures. If I click on failures, I'll get just failures. Okay, now I see only 237 failures, and I can go and see, strange countries. Who came from? Well, they're so strange that I don't know. Malaysia would be a good one. Now, there's a challenge here. You'll see that it's Alex Wilbur that failed, and if I go to Italy, it's still Alex Wilbur, which means that I have too much data. There's a issue with Alex Wilbur. I'll share with you that we know what it is. It's a username that leaked for the demo portal. We blocked it. We manage our security, and there'll be failures. It is blocked, so it's not interesting. It's not something you want to see. I can update my dashboard to ignore Alex Wilbur so that it doesn't affect the way I manage things. I'll do edit. To really do that, I'll probably have to go for a few elements here and change the query. I'll do it just for one. And keep in mind that when I'm in edit mode, it's still interactive. It still works. It's just a bit more interactive. I'll edit the sign-in details here. There's a query here. It's actually the query, your first encounter of our query language, which is called KQL, and is very extensive. For example, notice that it actually can have an X icons inside the query. First time I noticed that. And here I'll do no, that was the wrong language. If you didn't get it, you now know that I'm from Israel and that was Hebrew. User is not equal to Alex Wilbur. I'll run the query just to see that it works fine. No. Of course, I said where user and I didn't write where user. That's why you run a query to check. And luckily there are no records selected because that's what I was trying to achieve. I'll done editing. And now when I go here, I didn't change this one, so the numbers will still be high. But if I go to Italy, where I was before, well, India for that matter, I'll see there was no one else that failed login apart from Alex Wilbur. But if I'll go to the US, I can investigate real failures. From the US, there are a few other users that did fail to log in, and I can look into them. So that's an example of how you can use workbooks. Another example I'll share with you, something that actually a colleague of mine called Clive Watson blogged about, I think 2 weeks ago. It's a neat workbook that's a bit shows the privacy challenges of eSIM. It's available on our, you can read the blog, it's available on our GitHub. We generally manage content on our GitHub. And it shows, where was a person recently. So I pre-populated with my own travel for obvious reasons. I don't want to, but you can select other users as well as here. I don't want to go through them because I can share my information. I want to show others. And you can see that I'm somewhat of a traveler. I do travel too much. You also see the limitations of geolocation. So I've been to Canada early this month, actually, which is true. But I've been to North York. I haven't been to Calgary. My guess, Calgary is where the IP address for Air Canada is registered. Next, I actually was at Ignite the days after, and I'm not sure why it's registered as Las Vegas or Los Angeles, but then I was back in Israel, which makes sense. And Hatzor Aglilit, if you don't know, it's a rural, very far away city in Israel as you can get, and I live near it. So that's actually, user contributed there in our GitHub, blog post on that, very easy to create, to do whatever you want. So that was the Workbooks demo. We are excited about it because it's really a way to implement what you want, as well as for us to provide you way more value out of the box from the product. As we'll see later, Workbooks are not the main way to do investigation at Sentinel, but they do add a dimension when you want to report to management or you want to create your own investigation sequence. Let's move on. So we discussed connectivity, collection, and visualization, which I would term as log management. But where is the smart stuff? How do you do actually detection? That's where we get to analytics. So we have several ways to enable you to do analytics. As usual, I'll start with the slides and then I'll do a bit of a demo to show you how it really looks in real life. First of all, we have a large number of built-in analytic rules. When I say rules, it means that those are rules that you can get to the actual content of. You can modify them if you want. They are a starting point. We have, as I mentioned, our research team is very focused on making them production ready, so not noisy. But if you have a challenge, you can build them. We also have, we'll discuss it later, machine learning based rule, which are we work on behind the scenes and that you are not exposed to the queries for. You can create your own rules. We would like to provide you as much as you would like, but every organization has their own needs. We would love you to contribute to our GitHub. All the rules that we do start in a GitHub. We also have partners and users. As I mentioned, it's a very accessible product, so a larger, ever larger community. You'll find many Sentinel rules also starting to appear out there, which is pretty unique. I mentioned I'm coming from the scene world. I didn't see that level of a community around detection writing in other products. I've seen people writing connectors, but not detectors. You are able to use both third-party threat intelligence that you bring in. I mentioned the taxi and sticks connector, as well as using enrichment, which I'll discuss later on, or the Microsoft provided threat intelligence in order to correlate your data using rules with threat intelligence. Both the taxi connector and the Microsoft threat intelligence stream were introduced at Ignite last week, so new. And lastly, very importantly, I mentioned that one of the things that are really easy with Sentinel is to do automation. So when an alert triggers, you can trigger a playbook. We'll discuss those later on. In general, my experience when working with customers is that if with a traditional SIEM, the use case is built from collection and then rules and what to do about them is left to a second phase, because in Sentinel, automation is very easily accessible, a use case design usually evolves around all three steps. So collection, detection, and response. I did mention that we provide out-of-the-box machine learning. In practice, we'll see in a minute, it translates into elements within the detection gallery that you can turn on and off, but you can't look into the actual query. There is no simple query behind. As I mentioned, our advantages of machine learning is our experience from protecting Azure, as well as a large volume of signals and on-demand CPU capabilities. We'll take all the signals available to us through the Microsoft pipeline. We'll identify attacks that are relevant to you. We'll filter them. We'll reduce the number of them based on cross review of the security state across the world, and then we'll provide to you just those that are real. In practice, it means the numbers on the right are monthly, that we translate a huge amount of signals into dozens of alerts across our entire customer base for a month. It's a small, high value numbers where machine learning really delivers. In addition, okay, um, Sentinel is very useful as a platform for your own machine learning models. It's well, the slide says coming soon. I can verbally say that it's in private preview, so you are all welcome to reach out and join the private preview and start experimenting. Uh, in general, uh, our underlying technology, uh, the search engine that we use, which is a Microsoft internal technology called Azure Data Explorer, is enables our SIEM to double also as a data lake. You don't have to maintain two systems. You can directly use the data that you collected into SIEM also to create your own machine learning or analytics on top of that. I did promise a demo, so we'll skip to the analytics demo. What I wanted to show you here was mostly how rules look like. If we look into the rules tab, you'll see the rule templates. The rule templates are the rules that we provide out of the box. Rules are categorized by MITRE tactic, so you are able to identify your coverage. You'll see here that there are different types of rules. Scheduled alerts are, we'll see more of those today, are alert that you create using a query into the data, which triggers if something was found. We'll talk about that in a second. I'll show it to you. A second option for rules is actually a simpler one, but it utilizes an important concept. Microsoft provides not just Sentinel, we provide a large number of security tools. Many of them are market leaders. For example, Microsoft Defender ATP recently got into being a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for EDR. Microsoft Cloud App Security has recently reached the top at the Gartner analysis of CASB products. So we do encourage you, and in many cases you are using additional Microsoft products that already do detection. We will not replicate that at Sentinel. We don't try to do the same again. We do want to make sure that if you get an alert from those systems, it is surfaced in Sentinel so that you can centrally manage the incidents and respond using automation. With that in mind, first of all, collecting those alerts from those sources is free of charge with Sentinel. And secondly, we make sure that you can create incidents based on alerts easily, which is the Microsoft Security entries in the templates in the gallery you see here. I will not get into how you do that here. It's 2 clicks, so it's sort of less interesting for a demo. I'll actually go into one of the rules. Otherwise, I'll use log on as my example. So I'll focus on log on available log on rules, mostly failover and such. You'll see there is a significant coverage of those. You'll see that we also detect essentially brute force for AWS console, not just for our own environment, but also for Azure AD. So it's not just a Microsoft protection product, and for Cisco for that matter. I'll select one just to show you how it looks to define one. So those are templates. They're not on by default. You do have to use them to create a rule to get things. You'll be able to change everything, including description analysis, the MITRE tactics you want to classify by. All this is meta information. The important part would be the second part where we actually run, define what the query does, the rule does, and you'll see it's based on the query. The query can be 2 lines long. When we write it, it usually is not 2 lines long. We take advantage of the fact that our query language KQL is very capable, and we do make sure that we create the best rules for you. You can still learn that and modify them. Also, I meet a lot of people that are getting into that. It's a new query language. So initially, why yet another? People who are working with it for a short time are usually very happy with it because it's sort of easier than SQL and targeted towards exactly this use case. Next, you can select the playbooks that you want to run based on the alert, and then review and create, which I'll skip for now. Once rules triggers, they create incidents, which we will look at when we talk about incident management in a few minutes. So we described data collection and visualization, the log management side. We described and talked about analytics, whether rule-based or machine learning-based, whether we provide it or that you do yourself based on rules or machine learning. It's time to talk about what happens if an incident triggers. Detection is partially the role of the SIEM, but as I mentioned before, you have a lot of other systems doing detection. Incident management is entirely where you want to be within the SIEM. You want to collect alerts from external systems, Microsoft or otherwise, as well as alerts that were detected by Sentinel, and then manage them centrally. What does management means? So you'd want to collect related alerts, events, and bookmarks into a single incident. Bookmarks being the artifacts that we can assign. We might have time to talk a bit more about bookmarks later on. You want to manage them, assign them, keep track of status, add comments, all that is possible. So, and you can also, and that's important, integrate with your ticketing system. As a SIEM veteran, I know that no SIEM will ever get to be as elaborate in managing tickets as your ticketing system. And you'll have to choose between managing the entire life cycle of the incident in your ticketing system or splitting between Sentinel and your ticketing system. We provide both options. Just to share my experience, many times, as long as it's part of the SOC, maybe it's worth having it here. And once you need something which is outside of the SOC, you may want to integrate with, say, ServiceNow, which is supported. We actually support two-way integration. We can make sure that tickets are open in ServiceNow for an incident in Sentinel, and vice versa. When things are closed in ServiceNow, they are closed here as well. However, managing an incident is just managing an incident. You need to do more. Actually, what the SIEM is for is actually investigating the incident. And investigating the incident is where we actually provide very interesting innovation. Our investigation experience, as you can see it on the right, it looks great, but we'll get into the details to show how it really helps you besides looking very graphical. So first of all, it allows you to navigate between entities. When you define or when we create an incident, we make sure that there are known entities in it that create relations. We keep those relations, and we let you move between those entities to see related entities. We'll see in the demo how it really helps you in a second. Secondly, each one of the entities or alerts enable you to run expansion queries, as we call them, which are our know-how on what you should investigate further. If you want, it's guided investigation using search behind the scenes, but you don't have to know how to search. We provide you with this value. A graph-based investigation is good to a point. It's good to some cases. You see on the right, the timeline-based view is also very important and enables you to understand how things folded out. And lastly, for each one of the elements, of course, we show additional information. We'll see that in the demo in a second. Lastly, a neat feature that we introduced at Ignite for alerts that have a URL related to them that are about URLs. we actually added a feature to detonate those URLs. So regardless of how obfuscated they are into a short link, we'll open that as part of Sentinel and show you the actual page that the user saw on the screen. And let's go for a demo. Probably would be much better. Actually, I should stay here. So we'll pick the first incident here, and we'll drill into investigation. We see an alert, anomalous login. That's what I selected. It's, well, I don't know if it's good or bad. That's why I'm here to investigate after all. Let's start with the user, Mr. Robles, and see what are the top hosts that he actually is usually visiting. I'll have to play a bit with zooms and stuff when I do that because it's not planned for a demo, it's planned for an analyst big screen. We already see that the 5 top computers that Darcy is usually accessing are not the computer for which the anomalous login alert was raised. So anomalous login, which by the way, worth noting, it's an alert that came from Azure Security, from Azure Sentinel. So it's a rule that detects that there were many failed login attempts by Darcy Robles to this server. Something is wrong because Darcy usually doesn't touch this one. I'll close this. We'll have to get, if we decide that it's a real attack, we'll have to go back to those 5 and see if there's anything wrong with them. They are, now under investigation. But to save space, let's move on and see, other alerts that Darcy was involved in. And we'll pick that here. And there's quite a few. Something bad is going on. I'll start with this one. It's connection to a malicious URL. So that's something that was reported by a rule in Sentinel. And because it's about a URL, okay, if we look at the related entities, we can find this URL and we can look at what it was. And while initially it looks like a shortcut, a bit.ly URL, we can see that we detonated it and we actually can see what it is. So we can see where did the user go to. And it was a Dropbox, and obviously it was identified probably a bad file placed on Dropbox. So things are probably not okay. But then if I close that, we can see there are too many alerts, and probably it's time to go to the timeline view and look at the story as it unfolds. So the connection to the malicious URL was the first thing. The user accessed a bad place on the web. Might be harmful, might be blocked, but in this case, the second thing that happened is that the same user tried to do anomalous login attack on a specific server. Good chances that something bad did get to his computer, especially since that this might have been successful, because the next alert would be suspicious PowerShell activity, in this case detected by a Windows Defender ATP as an alert from an external source. That would be the privilege escalation here. Following that, anomaly signing to multiple computers. Now it's very important to see to where, because those are breached computers we have to continue investigating. So we get the list here as guided investigation. And lastly, mass download, which means there was probably an exfiltration attempt. So a classic example of a kill chain lifecycle. We started from one alert, we moved, we were able to investigate both how it folded out, verify that it's probably a real attack, as well as get information as to how to go further. One thing it's worth mentioning is that probably in most cases, you'll have to go also to the original interface. I'm not a big believer that there's a totally single pane of glass. There's a single pane of glass to make sure you never miss an alert and you triage and you get to initial investigation. This computer, once you want to get further, you need to investigate with an EDR, because EDR will, such as the Defender ADP, would always have a better capability at visualizing investigation on a specific endpoint. What we can help you with is to collect, to run the EDR and to collect the investigation package by using automation, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Hunting. We did discuss investigation, and I showed you how to use Sentinel to do investigation, learn more about incidents. Hunting would be an alternative way to operate your SOC, very popular these days. With hunting, you start from scratch, not from something that happened, and you want to try to find incidents or weaknesses within your system. In my mind, hunting is more a process and a know-how than a feature, and that's how we look at it. So the first thing we provide you in our hunting screen is a large set of queries that you can use in order to start hunting. This is the contribution of our research team. That's where they help you. Those are filtered by tactics and data source so that you can do targeted hunting based on the MITRE framework and focus on specific data sources. This is a starting point. You can add additional elements. You can create your own hunting queries, and you can modify ours if you want to. You can start an investigation from a hunting. The way you do it is that you mark the results of your investigation. We'll get to bookmarks in a second. And then this becomes an entity that can be investigated using the same interface that you saw before. So hunting and detection are not separate worlds. Both generate an incident that can be investigated. Let's look at the hunting screen in a bit more detail. You can see the rich out-of-the-box content. I think I don't remember the number, but there's quite a large number of out-of-the-box queries there. You can filter by name or by tactic or by data source or by favorites. You can mark those that are favorite to you, that are important to you. Again, this is something that someone gets to once a day or once a week, and they need a starting point. This week, we focus on brute force, etc. You can run all queries or all selected queries, whichever you prefer. It's actually a good manifestation for the horsepower that the cloud brings. You define hundreds of queries, you run them, and immediately get the result column. Okay, the result column enables you to find the outliers very fast.
Hey, Ofer, sorry to interrupt. I just want to remind everybody that today's session is 90-minute session since we're reaching here at the top of the hour. So we still have another 30 and so minutes to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Milan. Yeah. The hunting experience is just one way to hunt. It's guided experience. I do want to remind us all that a typical way to hunt, which we also support, is using search. Most hunting in real world is done using search. We have an extensive search interface, and the searching actually has a built-in capability to find outliers. So you can search using free text or filtered text. Both are available. You can tabulate your data. You can chart your data, and then you can automatically, actually, the system automatically finds for you outliers and explains them to you. So for example, if I go to this search, which I did, I think today, you can see that there are two elements which were found by the system once you did a search as anomalous. It's very easy to see that the one here is anomalous, of course, because it's high. The question is why. If I just click on it, you'll see that the system automatically finds for me the outlier. It separates the traffic into two patterns. Okay. The green one is the rest, and the blue one is the pattern that was identified, and it explains the pattern. In this case, it's my demo environment, and it seems that, I think it's yesterday, I think I ran it this morning, between 9 p.m. and later on, it's UTC, as you can see on the right. So it means, morning time or midday actually on the West Coast, there was a lot of activity against the Azure portal. The query this is based on is sign-in logs, as you can see. Sign-in logs can be for many different applications, probably a lot of demos. In this case, easy explanation. Call someone, ask if it was demo time, you're fine. But in other cases, you can find an offending IP, an offending user, all that without actually looking at the base data. The system automatically found for you the root cause analysis. Lastly, talking about hunting, two features. One of them brand new, introduced at Ignite last week, will be bookmarks and live stream. Bookmarks are a way to mark notable data and create an artifact from it. You do it as part of search or hunting on any result. Once you define the bookmark, and I might have time for a demo later on if time permits, I'll skip it for now. Once you have a bookmark, you can start an investigation from it. You can add it to an incident as an artifact. So it's essentially the way to bookmark, as the name suggests, any data in the event database. Lastly, our live stream feature enables you to, in real time, follow stuff. So see events or data as they come. It's query driven, so it can run any query, but it runs it in real time all the time. Some examples of areas it will be good for, blue team versus red team. You need to follow, things as they unfold. Real-time investigation of an incident when it happens. You want to, something starting to fold on a server. You need to make sure that you see all the security events on the server now on a separate screen. That's for you. It's also a great way to model and test in real time hunting or detection queries. I'll get to show that if time permits in a while. Lastly, all this hunting was based on the same technology, the same interface used for detection and investigation, namely queries. We are investing a lot, and you can use it in a more advanced way to do hunting, which is also the base for our bring your own machine learning capabilities. It's called Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebooks are an open source technology. There is a variant which is Azure based, so called Azure Notebooks, which we utilize. And Jupyter Notebooks are essentially snippets of code and documentation stitched together. So you can create a notebook, as the name suggests, that would do things and then display them. It's a great way for an advanced hunter to analyze data and visualize it. Unlike everything within the features I described so far, which is based on simpler query-based interface, this is programming, so comes with the complexity of, say, Python, but also with the capabilities of a full language. One thing we introduced at Ignite is that now you can access those. We had the capability to integrate notebooks with Sentinel for a while now, but now you can actually access those notebooks from the interface as you would before Workbook, for example. And in the near future, you'll also be able to actually edit those from our interface. So they'll be more accessible to anyone. Still, they are for advanced users, keep that in mind. How are they integrated within Sentinel? So we are providing the library, the capabilities for any notebook to query Sentinel data, so you can get data from the data store, or to write information to the Sentinel data store. But you can also bring external data. So it's a great way to combine the data set within Sentinel with external data set. As I mentioned, it's the base for our machine learning, bring your own machine learning capabilities. And lastly, it is programming language centric, but it's whatever programming language you would like to use. I think I mentioned before, I'll say it again. We are in private preview of our bring your own machine learning capabilities, and our team developing that would love to talk with you guys if you are doing bring your own machine learning and are interested to join that. It's advanced, so there aren't many organizations, and we are really looking for people to pick up and start using the feature. I mentioned I'll skip the hunting demo for time reasons. I might get back to that at the end if I have time. It is neat, but it's advanced, let's put it this way. Automation. So, trying to summarize the journey we've gone so far, and I actually will use, sometimes it's good to use that and go back and show things. So we've been through that, and I think it's a good time to remind us all where we are. Azure Sentinel is a full-feature SIEM. It's cloud-native and provides all the advantages of the cloud, and therefore it provides the typical capabilities that you want for a SIEM, namely collecting data and visualizing it. We've discussed connectors and workbooks. Then detection, whether analytics or hunting. And then investigation. Once you have incidents, you want to make sure you minimize the time it takes to investigate, decide if it's wrong or right, but then you need to respond. And one of the important tricks, the important advances in the SIEM world in recent years is the understanding that response is part of the same cycle. That it can't be just a visual interface to learn and investigate and just data. You have to do something to get secure. With this in mind, I'll get back to automation. So for automation orchestration, we are using Logic Apps. Logic Apps is a feature of Azure that's already GA. It enables us to build automated scalable playbooks. There's something very neat about running automation in the cloud because it's serverless. You don't have to worry about where does it run or how does it run. There's no VM behind that you're aware of. So you just create, you visually program a playbook and magically it actually does its work. We'll get in a minute to an example of something that would actually be hard otherwise. We have added, actually that's something that was added just before Ignite, in our GitHub, a library of sample playbooks, so you don't have to start from scratch. It helps you with things like blocking a user in Active Directory, interfacing with ServiceNow, which I mentioned is a common use case for automation, etc. So you don't have to start from scratch. And you can create your own playbooks using a large gallery of connectors. For those of you who are SIEM people, connectors here stands for a very different concept than event collection connectors. Connectors here are automation connectors, things that know how to reach out to an external system and do something there. How are playbooks integrated within Sentinel? I did mention that I demonstrated that you can trigger a playbook from from an alert when it triggers. You can also manually trigger it from the alert information. So when you look at the details of an alert, you can actually trigger a playbook. So an analyst can manually decide now he needs to do something after investigating. And I'll go here for the interface just for fun of it, because it's new to me. It used to be just in the details view. As of today, I think it's around a week old. You can actually also run playbooks from the investigation interface. So it's a small change, but for those of you who know Sentinel, since it's just a couple of days old, I thought it's worth mentioning here. Within the investigation interface, the analyst decides that some automation has to be run on this alert. He can do it from here. Let's look at the details a bit. So what a playbook does. So first of all, to be part of Sentinel, a playbook always starts with when a response to an Azure, that's Azure Sentinel. That slide, I need to fix that one. Sorry for that. That's the trigger that runs Sentinel, that runs the playbook, and tells it that it was run from Sentinel, then it has to be within the context of a Sentinel incident. The first thing that people usually do with a playbook is integrate into the workflow of incident management. In this case, we see that the playbook will create a ServiceNow incident. I mentioned that you may want to manage your tickets primarily on ServiceNow. It may also post to a SOC channel, say Teams or Slack, or you actually monitor for things and you want to um, have everybody in the SOC be aware of it. The second element here, which is very typical to a playbook, and actually the biggest time saver, one of the biggest time savers you'll have from automation, is the workflow element. The first thing that an analyst does once initial investigation shows that it might be true is to ask someone something. Reach out and ask. If you do it by email, you have a broken process. Automation workflows would help you to automate things, email or otherwise, okay, without the analyst having to go to Outlook and do things. In this case, we did use email. Email is sent automatically. For example, you get a geolocation alert. Somebody is alerted as being now in Manila, the Philippines. You send an email to the user, are you in Manila? Okay. Another option, some breach of the firewall, an email to the administrator, was the configuration changed today? The user will get the email, and within the email body, we'll have the option to select one alternative. Let's say, yes, it's me, no, it's not me. And the playbook will continue left or right based on that. Now that's easy to say, but hard to do. Think about an automation engine that does not live in the cloud. How does the signal from the email gets back to the automation engine and continues the process that was stalled until a selection? In the cloud, it's very simple. There is no server waiting. It's all serverless, and the click from the email was just accessing a cloud endpoint, regardless of the place in the world, getting right or left based on the answer. Next, of course, we'll have to do something. Respond. In this case, if false, we can close the incident in ServiceNow. That's one option. Another option, already supported today, is to close the incident in Sentinel. So essentially, an incident got in, was detected, an email was sent, answer was given, and then it was closed, and the analyst did not spend a second. On the other hand, it might not be that simple. Maybe the user getting the email will say, something is wrong here. I don't think I was in Manila today. In this case, we have to do something. Good chances it will have to get to an analyst, but meanwhile, we don't want to do something such as block the user or move the user to multi-factor authentication, potentially also block an IP address. Things are not limited to the cloud. You can use with Logic App and on-prem gateway to actually do activity on-prem in the customer premise, so just as accessing the firewall API. I did mention we have a large number of connectors. We may not have all of them. In general, Logic Apps is good around IT automation. It may not have all the connectors with security devices that you may be looking for, but extending is easy using either the generic API connector, which is very easy to implement, or actually writing a connector using Azure Functions, which still is serverless. You write a few lines of code, but you don't have to worry about where are they implemented. A few examples of playbooks that might be useful. Incident management. You can assign an incident to an analyst. So do some checking, do some query on the data, and decide that the incident belongs to an expert in a specific field. You just save time by not going through the wrong analyst. As I mentioned, you can integrate in a ticketing system and sync that back. Incident management is just one option. Enrichment is another option. One thing that people do a lot with automation is collect additional data on the alert. The example here is for geo information from the IP, but that might already be available in many cases in Sentinel. You may want to have who is information on the alert. You may want to get more data on the user from a user directory. All those are options. You can get out and reach to a secondary source of threat intelligence to find out if the original threat intelligence within Sentinel was accurate enough. You can collect a Defender ATP investigation package, for example, another way to do enrichment. And I mentioned validation emails. And lastly, of course, remediation, blocking users, IPs, conditional access, etc. With this in mind, I'll do a short demo around playbooks, mostly to show you how simple it is. I'll go to the same example that I've presented before. I'll pick this one. And you see that it looks very much like what I showed you in a screenshot before. The one thing I want to add here would be, I did mention that this playbook closes an incident in ServiceNow, but you would want to close the incident in Sentinel as well. So how do you do that? You add an action, and I look for a Sentinel action because I want to do something with Sentinel. And there are many things you can do with Sentinel. You can add a comment to an incident. You can add a label to an incident. You can actually manage the incident. Okay. What we really want to do would be to change the status. And if we change the status, okay, we can actually change the status to closed. Therefore, very easily providing the magic time saver I promised you. You can also add a, why it was closed as well as text. All this will be applied automatically to the incident. So all very easily, no programming involved. And once somebody was asked and said, that's fine, I'm fine, the incident would be closed. We are getting to the end. Before I summarize, I want to mention that this is a starting point. This is the general. I hope that for some of you it was boring because you already know the stuff. I did mention a few things that were new to Sentinel. They were introduced with Ignite. The next step would be either, very recommended, the follow-up webinars next week and after the holidays, which are deeper and more technically savvy. One of them about architecture, both cloud architecture, such as supporting multiple tenants in Azure, multiple workspaces, collecting from on-prem, how to build a connector, etc. And the one after, in January, about the workflow of a SOC analyst from creating a rule detection, analyzing in a real security use case. So that's one track. But the other track, as Valo mentioned, is making sure that you're connected to us on all the different resources that we have. I would very much recommend the tech community. We do have an SLA. We have a team of experts answering there. It's not a place where you'll post a message and we'll never get a reply. You will get a reply. And there are tech blogs. It's where we ongoingly share news, updates, tips and tricks, and how-tos. For better or worse, it has a lot more than the actual documentation of the product. And if nothing works, if you didn't find a way to get to us, Azure Sentinel at Microsoft.com is our email address. As I mentioned, from time to time, we do have meetups around the world, and if you follow the community, you will notice them. What do you do next? How do you start? I hope this was a good overview of both existing as well as new features introduced by for Sentinel at Ignite, such as URL detonation, live stream, etc. If you're already using, I hope that you'll enjoy the new features. If you're not using Sentinel still, it's a very short journey to start. You need an Azure subscription. You can do it using an Azure trial subscription. If you have one, great. Might be your MSDN subscription, DevStudio these days. You create an Azure Sentinel instance. It's usually 5 clicks away. and then you can connect several data sources. For on-prem, you'll need a collector, a bit more hassle, wait for next week. If it's within the cloud, usually click away. When you have connected data sources, you can start playing with the stuff.
Thank you, Ofer. So before concluding the call, let's just see if there's questions that we did not answer. One that I see here from Gary, I believe he's asking if there is an automated way to have an Azure Sentinel incident updated when MCAS alert is resolved.
So I did mention synchronizing upwards to ServiceNow. At this point in time, there is no built-in way to synchronize incident status between different Microsoft products and Sentinel. You can, though, do it using automation. Automation is a core element of Sentinel, and a playbook can trigger on an incident change in Defender ATP or MCAS and update, as I described just in a moment ago, Sentinel. So there is some effort there, but it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you for that. And I know we have lots of documentation out there in Azure Sentinel forums, but there's a specific question from John. He's asking, do you have a documentation on what sets Azure Sentinel apart from competition? This is important when discussion with leadership. Sentinel will probably not be on Gartner report for a year.
So that's true. I was trying not to be too salesy in this call, so I did not, splash marketing slides about why we're great. I will now reiterate. We have a few minutes, a few general areas, and then I'll try to send you to the right places for more. We are a cloud native SIEM. I think that among the large SIEMs, there are a few niche players. We're the only cloud native SIEM. We're not running VMs behind the scenes, which means that scale is both small and large is something we excel at. You can throw as much information at us without telling us upfront. You don't have to architect things. You can also start small. You can use Sentinel alongside your current SIEM if it's not time to replace it, just for the use cases where Sentinel makes more sense, usually cloud monitoring. So that would be one. The second one would be utilizing AI. The cloud enables us to do more AI out of the box based on A, Microsoft research, B, CPU resources on demand, and C, visibility into the larger event stream that we see versus a standalone SIEM that is just one customer. Automation would be a third one. While there are other automation engines on the market, a few good ones, they are rarely as integrated as ours is into Sentinel, and we do find that customers are very fast adapting automation when they use Sentinel. Because it's integrated, because it's easier to do automation in the cloud, which is really, really a big cost saver. That's in a nutshell. That's just three elements: scalability, AI, and automation. I do suggest I'm not a salesperson. I hope that came out clearly here. And naturally, if you join next week, you'll see me even more techy than today. If you have such a discussion, I will not pull our sales guy. That would be, but we do have a team of people that are working in the field closer to wherever you are in the world and are expert in having those discussions and showing the value of Sentinel. I would be happy to connect you with the right guy. Most of them are ex-CISOs. They know the stuff, and they would be great at communicating with you on those topics. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Ofer. So to the question where they're asking about multi-tenant implementation, we mention this, that Ofer will be covering this in our next week's webinar, that is for the cloud and on-premises architecture. And the next question.
I do want about that. There's one thing I want to mention. It might not be relevant to all of you. We did a very specific webinar for managed service providers. It's a specific type of multi-tenancy. And if you are a managed service provider and you were not aware of this webinar, reach out and make sure that you get it.
Okay. And talking about webinars, and there's a question, and if I remember correctly, you did mention something about coming up trainings and all that. So we have another question where they would like to understand if there's any training coming up for Azure Sentinel.
So at this point in time, because we are new and because we try to scale fast, we focus on webinars. If you're missing, again, this was the first one. There'll be 3 more webinars that are deeper in nature. This is the preliminary one. And we hope that they'll cover a lot. If you are a Premier Microsoft customer, we have a Premier engagement 5 days long that enables you to get your hands on on Sentinel. Reach out and we'll make sure that we connect you with the Premier support people that are relevant. And lastly, we do run pretty regular partner trainings. We do not have, as of today, a regular course that we provide to customers, and that's why we try to make sure that we provide as many webinars. If the webinars we do not address your need, Valor and I would love to hear more and understand how we need to enhance those and make sure that you get to all the details you need.
Definitely. And the last question for today, will Azure Sentinel be added to the AZ500 certification?
Yes, it will. I thought it was already added. With Ignite, it might be later this month, but it's coming shortly. I do need to say something about it. It's just part SIEM is a large beast. I don't expect that to be a replacement for deep training, but you'll be certified for Sentinel. So on that respect, it's useful.
Perfect, thank you. So just quick reminders before concluding this call. So as Ofer mentioned, and also I have posted the link, our next Azure Sentinel webinar is next Wednesday, November 20th. The topic is about cloud and on-prem architecture. For details and registration, you can go to aka.ms/security-webinars. In case we missed to answer your question for today, you can visit us at aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community, where you'll be able to ask questions on our Sentinel forum. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question. I want to thank all of those who helped answering questions through the IM window during the call. Thank you, Ofer, for a fantastic presentation. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.